Welcome to another edition of The Road To. I'm Patty Morsi, your host. Today we're going to focus mostly on Northern Virginia politics, but just to get things going, we're going to start a little bit of a discussion on what's going on nationally. But we always start off with an introduction of our guest panelists and our normal pundits that we have all the time. So I'm going to start with Mike Lane and let him introduce himself.
Patty, thank you for having me back. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Our regular viewers will know me as both the token Republican and the token inside the Beltway guy here on this panel. But I started off in Arlington politics, was actually sentenced to a term of office by the voters there, subsequently fired, which was a good thing, and then I became party official, being both Arlington chairman, 8th District chairman, and now I spend my time trying to help other Republicans get elected to public office.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And our other regular pundit is Phyllis Randall. And Phyllis, go ahead and give us your background.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a long hiatus. I'm happy to be back. I'm Phyllis Randall. I'm active in Loudoun County. I've lived there for 18 years now. I am most importantly the mother of two wonderful children, and I am currently the Fair Housing Board chairman for the Commonwealth of Virginia and really enjoying that job right now. So thank you.
Great. We also have two guests. We have Margie Vanderhei from McLean, and I'll let Margie tell you her background.
Thank you so much, Patty. It's wonderful to be back. Thank you very much for having me this morning to talk about the issues. I served in the House of Delegates from 2008 to 2010, representing McLean and Great Falls. Prior to that, I worked on state issues for 3 governors, going back to the Belial's administration, the tail end of that, when we worked on the long-range 2010 transportation plan. Mm-hmm. And I've served in 2 presidential administrations. So I've been in Northern Virginia my entire adult life and in public service most of it. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Margie. We also have Evan McBeth from Loudoun, and he's the Loudoun County Democratic Committee Chair. And go ahead and give us your background, Evan.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Patty. I really appreciate it. My name is Evan McBeth. I'm the chair of the Loudoun County Democratic Committee. Perhaps more importantly, though, just like most of the people we all know, I'm a homeowner and a dad. And I think those are the critical issues you need to know about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Evan. We're going to start off discussing a little bit about this, quote, war on women and whether there's a real legitimacy to that phrase. And I would like to let Phyllis sort of start off and let Mike respond and you guys jump in. But we've heard a lot of that tagline. And do you think there's something behind that, Phyllis?
You know, I know that my friends on the Republican side of the aisle say this was a made-up tagline that was just made to rally our base. But you know what? The truth is it came from somewhere. The fact that in Virginia, this General Assembly spent so much time on issues like not just an ultrasound, but a transvaginal ultrasound. The fact that we made national news over and over again, not because we were the best managed or best run state in Virginia, but of all the social issues that came down the pike this year. The fact that you look around the country and you find that in legislatures that are Republican controlled, you had so much time and effort and energy and passion and even money spent on women's issues. The fact that we're talking about shutting down Planned Parenthood clinics, which by and large are places where women go to get health care, go to get preventative services, I think gives the term war on women some credence. And I want to say one thing. I was watching Meghan McCain the other day on television, of course, John McCain's daughter, who is somebody who describes herself as pro-life. And she actually was talking about the war on women, and she said that, you know, what is going on with Republicans, and most especially Republican men, that don't realize that things like a transvaginal ultrasound, whether you're pro-life, pro-choice, or somewhere unclear, is an inappropriate thing to do. So when you look at the Lisa Murkowskis, when you look at the Meghan McCains, when you look at the Olympia Snows, you look at Republican women who have said to their Republican counterparts, you know what, guys, knock it off.
Yeah. What do you think, Mike? I mean, obviously the male perspective is going to be a little different, but
I don't know that it would
voice
be.
of reason
I
here.
don't know that the male perspective would be necessarily different. I think that, you know, first of all, I note for the record for Phyllis that both pieces of legislation in the General Assembly to which she referred were both sponsored, patroned by women in the General Assembly. So, you know, that's, I think, significant.
Yeah, but Mike, the woman sponsor of the vaginal ultrasound bill never read the bill. She admitted it. It was given to her to sponsor and given to her to put on the floor.
Okay.
And then she withdrew it.
Well, I do think there is a, you know, to a certain extent, you know, I'm not going to call it a war on women, but I think men and women want the same things. And I think Democrats just don't get it. And the reason they don't get it, I think, is personified by the new Android robot video released by the Obama administration 2 days ago. You know, they were going to have this whole thing about Julia, who is going to become a household word, and everybody was going to know who Julia was, and Julia, you know, did this, and Julia did that, and every time Julia turned around, you know, Julia had to have federal government assistance for everything she did. She couldn't go to school without Barack Obama's help. She couldn't go to preschool without Barack Obama's help. She couldn't stay healthy without Barack Obama's help. She couldn't go to college without Barack Obama's help. She couldn't start a business without Barack Obama's help. You know, I mean, I wonder where individual responsibility, which used to be the hallmark of our culture and our society, takes place anymore. I would be insulted if I was a woman and I was told I had to be like Julia. Julia apparently doesn't have a mind of her own. Julia does what the federal government tells her she should do.
Mike, I think you're kind of changing the subject.
No, I'm telling you,
we're talking about
the war on women.
Issues on reproduction. Margie,
well,
I think
you didn't, Patty. You did not ask me about, you know, any specific issue. You asked me if there was a war on women, and I think President Obama is conducting an economic war on the American people, and women are caught up in it. What Julia needs is not the government help every time she turns around. She
Mike,
doesn't need the government help breathing. What Julia needs is a job, which she's not going to get in Barack Obama's economy.
You know,
I'd like to
I
go
bet she
back.
is going to get a job.
let
with
Margie
Barack
go
Obama.
back to that, to the
I'd like to go
issues
back to
at
the
state
individual
level.
responsibility, because I think we started out talking about the transvaginal ultrasound, which was mandated by members of the House and Senate and the General Assembly, which to me takes away the individual responsibility and also the individual accountability between a woman and her physician. It was telling to me that while the sponsors of this legislation were willing to mandate the legislation and the procedure, they weren't willing to say it out loud. While they were willing to put in a personhood bill that gave full rights to zygotes, they weren't willing to talk about the implications that had for contraception and for a woman actually owning her own health care. So if we're really going to talk about individual responsibility and accountability, why not let decisions about one's private decisions on health care be between a woman and her doctor? And to the point, by the way, about the assistance for the economic fallout of all of this, I think the economic fallout is actually greater than the actual even healthcare implications for it, because the assault is on jobs, it's on healthcare, it's on decisions people make. This administration, this state administration, cut prenatal care, cut neonatal care, cut teen centers, cut opportunities for the poor. If we're really going to talk about economics, let's talk about economics. Let's talk about the fact that transportation and education didn't get funded while we were worrying about the kinds of decisions women make.
Right.
So but I'm very happy to have a discussion about what Barack Obama has done for women in healthcare and what will happen if that healthcare bill gets repealed. All the jobs, tax credits and everything he's given for small businesses.
Let's come back to that.
But let's come back to that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make the point, to circle back though, about individual responsibility.
And Evan, I'm sure you have a position because I see your leg moving.
A terrible habit, I know. I take this issue very personally because I have a wife and a daughter, as I think many people do. And so I find it very compelling to understand that my state thinks that my wife and my daughter aren't individuals. They are wards of this state of Virginia because they can't make their own healthcare decisions. They aren't allowed to get involved in their own lives, and that is just repellent to me in a very, very fundamental way. And when you talk about Julia and the things that she needed, what she needs and what she gets is what every citizen deserves. And you talk about individual responsibility and that being the foundation of this country. I respectfully disagree. The foundation of this country is not solely individual responsibility, but collective responsibility as well. We, the people, not I, the person. And we have always in this country, and especially in this Commonwealth of Virginia, Commonwealth, wealth held in common, have always understood that we have a responsibility to each other. And that when we all go together, when all boats rise, we're better off. And that includes women. You talk about Julia needs help from the government. Well,
No,
I have a question for
Julia
you.
doesn't need the help from the government.
Really? Then why did we
Julia
need
can help herself.
why did we need the Lilly Ledbetter Act? Were you in support of that? Was anyone in your party in support of that?
I was.
Really? That's
Mitt
why
Romney
I'm really,
was.
Mitt Romney was. He
Yes.
said he had to
Mitt
think
Romney
about whether
has
he would have
not been
signed.
able to-
No,
He had to think about whether he would have
Mike, that's
signed that.
exactly what
That's
he
actually
said.
not the case, and you know that's not the
That's
case.
not the
exactly
case.
what he
That's
said.
exactly
He
the
had
case.
an uninformed spokesman who was out there talking about it.
So he just
himself-
makes bad hiring decisions.
No, come on. You know there are minutiae that not everyone is prepared to talk about.
No, Mike. No.
Yes.
No.
Yes,
Actually,
yes.
when asked just a couple of days ago, would he have signed the Lilly Ledbetter Act? Mitt Romney said he'd have to think about it, not an uninformed spokesperson.
That's
he
right.
said that himself a couple of days ago. Now, perhaps in the past he said something different, but that is who Mitt Romney is. To say something different in the past and something else today, we get that, we know that. But a couple of days ago, he did say that he'd have to think about whether he signed it or not.
But I think Evan's larger point is kind of the core philosophical divide here, in that, the government, your example of Julia makes it sound like Barack Obama is advocating for the government to be helping in every stage of the game.
Or controlling in every stage of the game.
As opposed to the government setting some rules because rules are needed in society.
I mean,
And
controlling.
you guys take it from there, but I'm
controlling. Our legislature here in Virginia, because you jumped to national because you didn't want to talk about Virginia, which
Well, I
I
thought
understand that.
thought Patty said
I
we were
wouldn't
starting off with
understand-
national
I wouldn't
issues. I was
understand
just
that.
going where my
wouldn't
host took
understand
me.
You guys can
Here in
go
Virginia, they were putting the bill forward to have a transvaginal ultrasound. Talk about control. And let me tell you, and I don't mean to be offensive, but anytime somebody puts something in a woman's vagina that she did not ask to be there, that is assault. It is state assault. So if we talk about controlling, we're talking about the state of Virginia and many legislators on your side of the aisle being willing to assault a woman in the name of what? In the name of Virginia government?
Well, I don't think so, Phyllis. As you know, Governor McDonnell instructed the General Assembly to drop that provision.
Governor McDonnell put that forward when he was a legislator. Governor McDonnell put that in
the General Assembly to
his
drop that
own
provision
theses when he
and
was in grad
ultimately-
school.
Before or after the Daily Show made a big deal of it?
ultimately signed a bill that did not include that particular
He had to.
provision.
He
But I
had to,
think
but that was not his choice.
Phyllis,
And you know that,
look,
and I know that, Mike.
Women, men, children, everybody are worried about the economy. Where are the jobs? Why is it that Democrats want to talk about everything
the question
but
is
jobs?
this. The question
and the
is,
fact that there
where
aren't any
was
jobs?
Bob's for Jobs?
Bob
McDonnell
is
was
creating
elected
jobs. All right,
on Bob's
let's
for
go through.
Jobs.
Virginia-
Where was Bob's for Jobs?
Virginia
Do you know what
unemployment-
85% of the time down there was spent on? Voter ID, guns, and reproductive issues. Although I will say this, although most of the bills that were put forward were not about these issues, most of the time that was spent, in fact, about 85% of the time, if you go through and look at how much time were on these issues. Bob McDonnell ran on Bob's for Jobs. That was a fantastic slogan, but you know what, Mike? It was just that, a slogan.
Well, let me point out for you, Phyllis, that the latest numbers show that unemployment in Virginia is down close to 5%.
And that's mostly federal jobs in Northern Virginia. Thank God for the federal government that you guys want to fight so much.
I will put the number of federal jobs versus the number of private jobs in Virginia up against anything, and the vast, overwhelming preponderance is private jobs.
We should probably thank Terry McDonald for a good number of those jobs. Terry
Virginia
McAuliffe for a
is
number of
the
those jobs.
best-run state for business and has been.
Actually, Virginia this year was the third best run state
and has been since
Virginia.
George Allen was governor back in 1993.
Under Mark Warner and
Now-
Tim Kaine, but now this
Now-
year it's the third best one state. Go check it.
I want to talk to Margie for a second because I think the interesting thing about Virginia and jobs is that we are so tied to the federal government, and it's not just government employees, it's the contractors who are categorized as private industry. So how, like when you were in Richmond and when you watched this last session, how are you seeing them attacking the issue of how jobs get expanded in Virginia, given that we do have a lot of government jobs, and not just in Northern Virginia, but lots and lots of contractors around Norfolk, Hampton Roads?
Well, I think the larger issue, Patty, and I know this has become a big study that's come out of George Mason University as well, is that we have serious workforce issues here in Northern Virginia. We are going to have to increase our workforce by about several 100,000, replacing the people who retire and bringing in new people for the growing economy that we expect here by virtue of the fact that we're here tied to the national government. The problem is we're going to need to address in a very serious way the housing, the transportation, the education policies that we have now to be pro-business. You really, and this study says it, this isn't just me or just the Democratic Party, to be pro-business, you really have to be for education and transportation funding, and you have to create an inclusive economy and an inclusive society where people are going to want to come here. Well, the governor's solution was to spend education dollars on transportation. We got naming rights through the General Assembly this session for transportation, which isn't going to fund a lot of roads. And
what's naming rights?
That means if a private entity, a corporation, can decide to buy the naming rights to a bridge. So instead of having the American Legion Bridge or the Cabin John Bridge, we can have the Papa John Bridge instead. And
I like that.
That's
good.
Cool. That's good. Well, that's what we got out. That is not going to fund the $1 billion per year what we need for transportation. And the borrowing that was done is really going to be paid for the next 4 governors who come along. So if you want to be pro-business, if you want to be pro-jobs, you have to fund education, you have to fund transportation, and you have to create an inclusive society, which means you're not attacking women's rights, you're not anti-family because you're anti-gay, you want more voter ID and better ID, you want to create the kind of society in which you're going to attract workers and then provide the education and transportation solutions for people to come here. The big default and the big disappointment in this session of the General Assembly is that was the avowed priority, but that isn't what got done.
Okay, and what's your observation of in terms of how the General Assembly dealt with sort of priorities this year?
I think the priorities are completely backwards. In Northern Virginia, the most important project in the country is taking place, and that's the Silver Line extension to Dulles. We want to talk about jobs. There are provisions that are in Silver Line 1 that guarantees that the people who are working on that jobs are being hired from the local area. This governor and our Loudoun Board of Supervisors oppose the provisions that would guarantee those jobs are from people who are hired in our area, would go to people who need that work in our area. This governor and the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors support being able to bring in workers from South Carolina or Alabama to do that work, and leaving our laborers here in this area needing that work. That's not pro-job.
It's a very clever soundbite, Evan, but what you're really talking about is that as long as they agree to be forced to join a labor union, then they will
that's
have
not
their
true,
job.
Mike.
Yes, it is. That's exactly what you're talking about. Look,
50% of the work,
Virginia
50% of the work
is
on
and
phase
always
1
will be a right-to-work state.
Mike,
we are not going to buy into this PLA crap that the Metropolitan Washington
Mike, 50% of the work done on phase 1 is non-union.
We are not
50%.
Right.
And the PLA requires that
Virginia,
any non-union member.
96% non-union.
And
so let's have some statistics that reflect what Virginia is all about.
We're
not going to force our workers to join unions.
You're absolutely
to take a place like that.
If I may, the fact is, do you know what a PLA does? It allows any non-union.
Yes, I know what a PLA does.
Really, because you clearly don't, because you don't know the fact. The fact is, it allows any non-union worker to walk into a union hall and get the same rights and the same privileges
if they join
without
the union.
joining.
They actually. And you know what?
Without joining the union,
if a non-union company signs the PLA, they have just signed themselves up as a union company. That's the way a PLA works.
That's not
so
true,
how many
Mike.
non-union companies are going to do that? The answer is none.
Then how is it that 50% of the labor done on phase 1 is being done by non-union? If that's true, then
because
it's
they didn't
impossible.
sign it because they don't sign the thing directly. That's why.
Oh, so it's not true that the contractor signs. So which is it?
No, if the contractor signs, that's what I just said.
But you just said
if a
50%.
non-union company signs a PLA directly, they have just unionized their company. Gone. Done.
See, that's
But it's not even mandatory right now.
exactly.
It's been amended
All
by
right.
MWA so
Well, you know
that
what?
it's not a mandatory
It's
PLA.
national statistics show that PLAs cost more money, that they result in overruns far
here in
above
Virginia, we've
what
always done
non-union
things our
labor
own
does.
way. In Virginia, we've always done things our own way, which is why when the project with a PLA, phase 1, got started, it's on time, on budget, no fatalities. But the project without a PLA, the Springfield Interchange, late, $300 million over budget and 5 deaths. And that's a cost too high for my Commonwealth.
You know,
Well,
the other thing is, I think what
I don't even see the relevance there,
A
but-
couple things. I think, you know, when I'll speak for myself, but I think I speak for most people. When we elect a governor and administration, we actually hope they do well. I actually, at the moment Bob McDonnell won his election, I hoped for good things. I was not hoping that Bob McDonnell went down there
And he has.
and failed and focused on issues that did not need to be focused on and wasted time that did not need to be wasted. We actually gave him our support because at this moment he's our governor and we only have one. But instead he did, and they did, the legislature down there did not do what we normally call the Virginia way, and even have a handout to try to be nonpartisan. It was a incredibly partisan, socially driven agenda.
Driven by the Senate Democrats. That was the problem.
Wait,
the Senate Democrats driving the social agenda.
We were not even in control. There was no.
It was the Senate
you know
Democrats,
what?
Phyllis. You
You
know
know,
that.
I-
They're the ones that drove
Mike,
the
are you serious,
hyperpartisan
really?
atmosphere. Absolutely.
That's just that
It was
is
the
more
Senate
ridiculous than
Democrats.
I have time to explain.
Margie,
it.
you've
Buddy-
been there.
Buddy Dick
I'm
Sasslaw.
going to ask Margie.
got
She's
you.
been there.
Well, the House didn't have to be overly anxious about their partisanship because they control the House in a very dominant way,
They control the
68 to
Senate, too.
32. So basically, their message was to the Democratic caucus, pound sand. We don't really need you. There was more contention in the Senate because it was more evenly divided, but it was over the need to actually create better priorities in the Senate version of the budget. And the Senate Democrats, to their credit, said we can't take this budget as constructed by Bob McDonnell and approved by the House back to our district because it absolutely underfunds transportation and
Let me
education
just say
and the things we
one
care
more
about.
quick thing about the rail. You know, Virginia economically communicates with the country and the world in two places. One, the ports. Down in Southern Virginia, the Hampton ports, Portsmouth down there, and 2, Dulles Airport. That's how we economically communicate to the country and the world. The Rail to Dulles is a project that needs to happen for the long-term stability of Virginia. We need to figure this out, and whether we figure it out, I mean, I am a union supporter, but the issue is not just the union issue. Bob McDonnell made some promises when he ran about how he would fund Rail to Dulles, and has pulled back on all those promises, blaming it on the unions. That's ridiculous. He's the governor. At some point, take control of your party, take control of your own message, and do the things that have to be done to economically communicate with the rest of the country and the world.
I guarantee
we
you,
need
Phyllis.
Rail to Dulles.
I guarantee you, if the hyper-partisan labor partisans on the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority, who are Tim Kaine appointees, if they will drop this ridiculous project labor agreement incentive that in actuality is a requirement because the incentive is so high, we will get Rail to Dulles. I guarantee it.
So you're telling me the governor, the head administrator of our Commonwealth, is being controlled by a couple of people on the transportation board. What kind of leadership are you talking about
I'm
right
talking about when Tim Kaine's appointees drop this ridiculous hyper-partisan thing for labor, we will get Rail to
So
Dulles.
we're not
Safety's
going to
hyperpartisan?
communicate with the country and the world on economic issues because in your estimation,
We are not
that is
going to
ridiculous.
turn
That is-
Virginia
that is
into a
ri-
forced
that-
labor
that-
state.
We
We are a
wouldn't turn
right-to-work
Virginia
state,
into
and
a
we're
forced
going to
labor
stay a
state, and
right-to-work
you know that
state, and we are
wouldn't.
not going to go
The
forced
fact that the
labor.
governor has to use that to blame people so that he doesn't fund the
Facts
project
are facts.
that he actually ran on it's fairly embarrassing for the governor and for your party.
I don't
Mike.
think so. I think ultimately, MWA is going to cave. I think that it may take a few of their terms of office expiring and being replaced
We
by
need to do this
McDonnell
now, or we
appointments.
may not be able to do it in the future.
Well,
we
then
don't
I
have
su-
a whole
then I
long time to
suggest
do
that
this.
Tim Kaine's appointees
this
stop
is
playing
not just
chicken
about
with
the governor.
Virginia's
This is also
future.
about the
What's
Loudoun
the federal
County Board of Supervisors.
contribution? Because my sources recently have said that the federal contribution is not there for the extension.
Oh no! As far as I know, the federal contribution is there for the
Tom
for
Davis
the
got that.
extension,
So,
as is the
Tom
Fairfax.
Davis isn't in Congress.
As is what Fairfax County has put forward. The stoppage right now is at state and at the Loudoun County level.
It's the disconnect between the financial impact of the project and how much the state is putting in. When there's
Right.
money going to different projects of far lower priority and significance in other parts of the state, why aren't we funding the project that creates the economic generator for the Commonwealth?
Right.
And you're right, Phyllis. I mean, between Dulles Airport and the Hampton Roads Port, the deep water port,
That's how we
that's a
communicate.
huge economic impact.
It is.
The fundamental question all Northern Virginians should be asking this administration is, why is it when we send so much money downstate in terms of our taxes, are we getting shortchanged so badly here in Northern Virginia with respect to our transportation priorities and education?
I would suggest it's
I would-
because we have an ineffective delegation to the
I
General
would
Assembly.
say, well, I would say that the
I kind
problem
of agree
is
with that, which is why in Loudoun County we need to elect more Democrats to that delegation.
And in Arlington and Alexandria and Fairfax, we need more Republicans.
we had
Oh, I
our
disagree,
Democrats
because they've been
working
very
very
effective.
hard to reverse and roll back that cost to compete money, and also to hold the line to get more money for Dulles. That's really what the fight over the budget was all about, and that's why we had the stalemate to try to get funding for our transportation priorities, so we wouldn't be in debt for the next 25
Well, and the
years.
governor's now saying that we should make up the difference with tolls, user fees for.
Right.
How do you guys feel about that? We just have a minute. We have 40 seconds left.
I
but
think tolls are terrible. Tolls are a regressive tax on people who can't afford to pay them. It's a way of segregating the roads so that the wealthy get to go faster than the poor. And I find it to be really repugnant.
Well, it drives people to use the mass transit, but then there's less people paying for it.
What
so
mass transit in Loudoun County are you talking
Well,
about?
when it gets out there.
But we've already demonstrated that's not likely to happen with Republican governor.
Well, and I will also say that the toll roads are always said to be used for transportation issues and things like that. And the fact is that the Dulles Toll Road has been paid for by the tolls that we've paid for years now, and we're still paying the toll.
Yeah.
The problem
And the
with
tolls are
toll road-
going up
the
and
tolls are
up
going
and up and up
They
and
never
up.
Guys,
go
we got to
away.
wrap up for this half, and we will be right back after the break with the second half of the Road 2.
Following the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for. Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember,
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for. One nation,
Under God.
Indivisible,
with liberty.
and justice.
For all.
in America, there's either room for everyone or it's not America.
Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
You'd never know it on the battlefield. But nearly half of today's military are National Guard and reservists. However, they can't answer our nation's call without their employer's support. If you're an employer, visit esgr.org and find out how to do your part. After all, their response depends on yours.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
I'm sick of this. I'm sick of dealing with you. I'm sick of
I work 6 days a week. Who do you think you
Stand up
are?
straight.
Don't you ever talk back to me again! You just shut up!
What are you crying about?
What a child learns about violence, a child learns for life. Teach carefully. We can show you how. Act Against Violence. Call 877-ACT-WISE for a free brochure.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promised.
Okay, hon.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promised.
What kind of man are you?
I'm a father.
Look here, my father was a father, and he smoked his brains out in the house.
Watch as he blows those smoke rings on my little red face.
You probably have asthma.
Asthma? Schlasma. I'm telling you, nothing's gonna happen to your kids.
Don't swear when you're lying. You know very well
know that thousands of kids get bronchitis, ear infections, and even pneumonia from their parents' cigarette smoke? And didn't you promise your little angels you'd smoke outside?
Hey, Daddy. Hi, Dad.
Those little devils are just so sweet.
Do the right thing.
Please, smoke outside.
Until you can stop, go out for your kids.
Take the pledge. Call 1-800-513-1157.
As time flows on, there are places we return to again and again. Precious places. Timeless places. Places that, with your help, can endure forever. I'm Paul Newman. Help the Nature Conservancy save the last great places around the world.
Welcome back to The Road To. We're going to continue to talk about state and local. Switching actually to local for a minute here. We had some elections in Loudoun, and we cover Fairfax and Loudoun on this show. And I wanted to talk to Evan about the Loudoun elections and what's happening now that the Board of Supervisors is all Republican. What's the dynamic in terms of how the public is responding to some of the initiatives they've taken in the last few months?
Well, thank you very much, Patty. I appreciate you bringing it up. Loudoun County is an interesting place to do politics, as you well know, and this board is making it even more interesting. They have been making all their decisions behind closed doors. A very famous, a very interesting thing happened this past week where Supervisor Clark actually put out a newsletter saying that a vote had taken place and passed, but that vote actually hadn't yet been cast, thus providing yet more evidence that these decisions are not reached in public eye or in transparency, but behind closed doors with 8 Republicans in the room. The LCDC, 9 Republicans in the room, yes, forgive me. The LCDC has been successful this year in actually pushing back against that. We're very proud to have elected Kelly Burke to the Leesburg Town Council, thus returning the Leesburg Town Council to majority Democratic control. So, you know, if you hear that Loudoun County is all Republicans, it's simply not true. The largest town in this Commonwealth is in Loudoun County. It is the town of Leesburg, at least when Blacksburg's out of session. And it is controlled by the Democrats. We're very proud of that. We're very proud to have reelected her. And, you know, we've been doing as much pushback as we can against Supervisor Delgado in Sterling because it is simply and completely inappropriate and wrong to have the leader of a hate group in elected office. And it's appropriate for him to step down. And we in the LCDC, and I think all right-thinking people in the county of Loudoun, believe that Scott York and his friends on the Board of Supervisors need to do more to withdraw any authority and power that Eugene has. It would be a very simple thing for him to remove him from his
the audience a little more about the so-called hate group and where that came from.
It's not so-called, it's a hate group.
Well, I mean, it was the Southern Poverty Law Center.
That is correct.
That they annually designate organizations that they believe are violating civil rights, or what's the criteria?
There's a group that Eugene's been the president of for a long time called Public Advocate of the United States. What they do is they hate gay people, and they spread the hate of our LGBT citizens far and wide. And what Eugene does is he uses his mailing lists of similar thinking people to raise money for his runs for office in Loudoun County. Recently, he has sent out a mailer that had an image of a rainbow shadow of a body bleeding. That was used in a fundraising mailer for him. That's why it's a hate group.
What was that?
That was a mailing he did last year to try to raise money. And he had an image of a shadow that was a rainbow flag.
Oh, okay.
And it was
so
bleeding.
That was to a gay.
Yes, it says gay symbol.
Symbol?
Exactly.
Okay.
It was really
I didn't
deeply
get it either
Republican.
when I saw it. So,
well, in your defense, I'm sure this isn't exactly a world you're very familiar with. I don't know what your exposure is, but I just think that here in Loudoun County and with my citizens.
In Mike's defense, he might not have got it because he's not a person that would naturally hate another group of people, no matter who they might be.
Yeah.
I would hope so.
Eugene Delgado is.
Where'd this love fest come from?
No.
Just for a quick second.
We've known you for a while, Mike.
But
all right.
We could go on and on about what Eugene is and what he does, but his fellow Republicans.
Let me ask Evan a question. Let me ask Evan a question. And you know, let me say first, I'm shocked and appalled that a uber liberal group like the Southern Poverty Law Center would find Eugene Delgado to be offensive. Just shocks me that
Civil
would
rights is uber liberal. Good to know, Patty.
Let me let me ask you more about Loudoun, and that is, I mean, you're in a deep hole, Evan. You really are. And I've been in your place inside the Beltway, and we haven't cracked the code as to how to get out of it yet. And I want to know, where is your plan for getting out of the hole you're in? Because you don't have a single seat on the Board of Supervisors. The vast majority of your delegation to the General Assembly is Republican. You almost lost your last one, except we had such an inept candidate against him that it just, there was no way he could lose, to her.
No way he could lose.
No way he could lose to her.
From Mark Herring to Patricia Phillips.
So,
yeah, well, Mark
where are you going with this? How are you?
Amazing.
I mean, at some point, you have to admit that you live in what is still a red area.
I disagree with you completely.
You have not purple. Well, I mean, give me the facts.
I can give you
what
a
do
fact,
got
the
going?
single fact you need to know. And this is the fact that Republicans are terrified of, which is why so many things have been happening nationwide on this issue. When more people vote, Democrats win. If you look across the history of Loudoun County in the past 5 or 6 years, the more people vote, Democrats win. The fewer people vote, if you can prevent people from voting, if you make it harder to vote, that is how Republicans win. In 2011, we had tiny turnout. They did an aggressive job to suppress the Democratic vote. They did robocalls into Democratic households to suppress the Democratic vote. So the Republicans'
this
entire
is campaign tactics. I mean, what do you mean by suppress the
wait,
vote?
So, no,
hey,
so I have a question.
Your guy's awful. He's a bad candidate. He's going to do this. Oh, come on, that's politics.
But why
That's
don't Republicans want people to vote?
Let me say this.
Well, let me say this. We want the same thing you want. We want all of our people to vote, and you want all of your people to vote.
No, I want more people in general to vote. I want 100% turnout.
Let me say this.
I would go for that.
Listen. Eugene DeGadio is who he is, and I actually think that to some degree we are wasting our time as Democrats trying to force him to step down. I think it just gives him more media so he can be more clownish like he is. My question would not be, why is Eugene DeGadio the fool behaving like Eugene DeGadio the fool? My question would be, where's Tad Greason? Where's Joe May?
Yeah.
Where is Scott York? Where is Randy Minshew? Where are all the Republicans who are, in my opinion, good moral people? We may have differences on issues, but they're good moral people. Why are they turning their backs? Their silence is deafening. They should be the ones, not the Democrats, but they should be the ones that are saying to him, you need to do something different. There are times when a party needs to purge itself. And the fact that the Loudoun County Republicans are not trying to purge themselves of Eugene DeGadio is a blight on the Loudoun County Republicans, not in the Loudoun County Democrats.
This is just really a microcosm of a national thing where the Republican Party is not a homogeneous party. And
no party is.
I think
right.
that's right.
But I mean, this gets at the heart of another issue with Mitt Romney's, foreign policy spokesman stepping down, and they made it sound like he wanted to. But Margie, what's your observation on that?
I just think that DeGadio is almost like the poster boy for the kind of feeling that it's okay to be against people, it's okay to suppress voter turnout, it's okay to be anti-gay, it's okay to have votes and have bills against women. There's a culture that says we'd really much rather wake up and still have it be Father Knows Best. And I think there are some people who are trapped in that, and it gives them permission to be complacent when all of us should be standing up and saying, no, if we really want a better America, if we really want a better Virginia, then these are the kinds of bills and these are the kind of positions that can't be tolerated.
And these are the kind of
so
people.
he is
And
just
these are the kind of
emblematic
people.
of a culture that has become, over the last few years, and I would say with some help from the kinds of legislative bill kind of factories that crank out this kind of punitive legislation that have permeated the country since we had the 2010 Tea Party overthrow in Congress. We will see more of it until finally people say, wait a minute, this is not America.
Right.
I am not that low, mean-spirited, and unkind to my fellow Americans, and I don't want it, and there will be some pushback. But people have to stand up and say something, I think.
Let me say, years ago, I am, by profession, I'm a substance abuse therapist, and years ago, I actually had a fairly loud voice talking about the things that Marion Barry was doing. Marion Barry, who at that time was the very powerful mayor of Washington, D.C., I thought he was a bad example of a mayor. I thought he was not helpful for African Americans and not helpful for children. So I have a history of speaking out when my own party is doing something that I think is appalling. And so I am not kind of just spewing out stuff here. There are times when good people of good conscience and good faith and good morals should say something to people in their party when they know that person is doing inappropriate.
You were in elected office. What would you have done? You were in elected office locally. You said yourself you served a term. If you were on elected office with him,
I was sentenced to a term.
That's true. So what would you have done?
You asked for it, though, Mike.
If Eugene was serving on you, what would you have done as a Republican?
Serving with you.
You know, he
really?
does.
You're pausing? You're not immediately denouncing him?
You know, here's the thing. Not my issue. It's not. No, not.
No, it's a human rights issue.
No, not commenting about it. Eugene's issue is not my issue. It's not something I would pursue. It's not something I would make a point of. It's not something I would particularly support. You probably wouldn't find me on his donor list or anything like that. I mean, you know, people have different ideas as to where they're going. It's not, you know,
But would you denounce him? You would. I believe you would, Mike. I believe you'd denounce him.
Are you begging, Phyllis? No,
Maybe.
you know what?
Perhaps.
Let me ask you this. You know, we all parties at all levels have this thing. You know, I'm still waiting for the president to denounce Al Sharpton.
No, what you're doing now is changing the subject.
You know,
what you're doing now is changing the subject.
If there's a bigger, more despicable race baiter in the country today than Al Sharpton, I don't know who it is.
Al Sharpton isn't serving an elected office.
I did, but when do we denounce him? You know, I'm saying this.
He's not serving an elected office. You have an elected official.
Is that some sort of is that some sort of criteria?
Yes, because you're given the public's trust.
But there's a culture of intolerance that I think people are beginning to wake up to, and it isn't just the gay bashing. It isn't just women. It's inequities. It's fairness. And this election, whether it's the next state election or the national election, is going to turn on fairness. Mm-hmm. How do you treat other people? Are you being given a fair shot? Are you expected to do what needs to be done to play your part to make this a better society? And are you accountability for your own actions? And I think if we have a conversation about fairness, a lot of people who see this really punitive, hateful legislation are going to say, that's not the America I want. I want an economic
and I couldn't agree with that more. And part of that fairness goes to some of the voter ID laws that are coming up around the country. These laws are simply meant to depress voting. Now look,
solution in search of a problem.
The truth is, you're right. Republicans are going to, push hard and campaign and send robocalls in the House and all that to get their people elected, as will Democrats. Mm-hmm. That's what politics looks like. But the moment you start putting in legislation that is only meant to squash people's rights to votes. Now we're actually rolling back to the 1960s and some of the Jim Crow laws. There's a woman on TV the other day, she was 90 years old, she's been voting, she's had in every election for years and years, and she usually goes up and she uses things like her utility bill and things like that for her ID. She doesn't know where her birth certificate is. She's 90 years old, she's an African American. Virginia new voter legislation actually takes her right to vote away. She doesn't have a birth certificate, she cannot get an ID.
Actually,
that type of thing is
actually,
and these things are happening all across the country in Republican-driven legislatures.
I believe there are 31 states that require identification to vote now, and I don't believe in Virginia that the way you've just represented the legislation is accurate.
Okay, then tell me what's
primarily you want a government-issued photo ID, but a utility bill or a Social Security stub or something like that
has worked in the past.
And still will under the new legislation is an acceptable secondary form of identification.
The House turned that back. But secondary means that you have to have two.
No. It means if you don't have the government-issued photo ID.
That's what the governor amended, and then the House sent it back and restored all the onerous requirements in it, and that's why the Post came out recently with the editorial saying, what's the governor going to do? Because of the 5 million people who voted, 38 votes were found to be in question.
Right.
That is not the reason that you have legislation that completely changes your voter, your voter ID requirements. The governor now has to decide if he's going to accept the more onerous requirements that the House put back in.
Margie, let me remind you. 6 years ago, Bob McDonnell won the Attorney General's office by what was it, 250 votes statewide or something like that.
It was
38 fraudulent votes could be 380 fraudulent
But
votes,
it's not
which
enough to
becomes the
overturn
margin
the
of
system.
victory.
To
38
disenfranchise
fraudulent vote
everybody.
wasn't 380 fraudulent
And they weren't
votes.
fraudulent. Let's be clear on this. Margie
Yeah.
did not say they were fraudulent.
No.
They were provisional. They were ones that needed to be checked out. They were not fraudulent. Can you name one successful prosecution of voter fraud in the Commonwealth? One. No, because there hasn't been one. Because this is not a problem.
It's just not a problem,
it's
but
not an issue.
it's really
So
back
what
to
are-
the governor now to see what he's going to do. I mean, if he
this is suppression of voter rights, and there's nothing, and I don't use this term lightly, and I don't think it should be used more often. But there's nothing more un-American than to try to suppress people's right to vote.
should be encouraging them to get to the polls.
You should be encouraging them
As
in every
another
way to
democracy,
get
it's
to
I'm with
vote.
Evan. I want to see
country.
100% turnout.
I do too.
What was the turnout last fall in Loudon? Do you remember?
I don't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere around 29 or 30.
29, I think it's 29%.
Under than
29%,
30.
something like that.
And what's it going to be in
Because
November?
it's a lot different.
More than that.
I know. I mean, for instance, we have
Well, governor's years are
inside
always more.
inside the Beltway. No, November is presidential
Presidential
year.
year.
Inside the Beltway, we're going to have 75 to 77% turnout inside the Beltway. What's it going to be in Loudon?
I hope it'll be over 60 or 70. I honestly don't. It was 80 some odd in
I
2008.
could be wrong about this, but I think that 4 years ago, I think it was 72%. It was the highest we had ever had it before. So it was really pretty high last
Okay.
time. And presidential years are always high.
Right.
But let me say this. Let me say this since we actually have a moment on camera. I actually want to encourage people to not just come out and vote every 4 years. You know, we have a unique right in this country to vote for local offices, state offices, and federal offices. And it's something wrong when voter turnout falls off by 20, 30, 40% in off-election years. I gotta tell you, as a woman and as an African American, people did not fight and march and die so that I could vote every 4 years. They did it so I could vote every year. And shame on the people who only come out once every 4 years to vote.
But there are
and
plenty
vote
of
all the
people,
time.
as we know, Phyllis,
Vote in every election.
having been candidates in Virginia.
I think, yeah.
I think we have unanimity on what Phyllis just said.
I think
we
we've
do.
seen that the odd year elections, especially in Loudon, where things, constantly people were moving in from other states, where. What do you mean odd year election? What do you mean a delegate? What's a delegate?
And we vote every year.
I have a
Sometimes
theory on
many times a
Is it
year.
that hard to you're driving along, you see the yard signs and the median strips. Is it that hard to figure
Well,
out
that's
there's an
a great,
election
but they
coming?
don't
that's
know
a
the
fantastic
people.
point.
I agree with Mike.
Because in Loudoun County, I actually have a slightly different theory about voter turnout, and that is, people talk about Loudoun shifts from left to right all the time. I believe that voters in America, when things are going okay, they don't worry about their government. That's the whole point. So they don't vote. So that's, Democrats get elected. Well, things are going great. I don't need to go vote. And then voter turnout goes down. And Republicans come in.
But
And everything goes to
but that's
crap.
not okay.
So now they all come
But
back out and
but
let
that's not
Democrats
okay.
clean it up.
But they also
I
don't
started,
see
Patty-
the linkage between the national, state.
Yeah,
I mean,
Patty,
let's
that's not
face it.
okay.
Where all the
I
most
started-
decisions
don't
are made
see
that
it.
affect
Local
their
level.
life are really made at the state and local
they are,
level, and
yeah.
you try to
They are.
explain that to people and say, who do you suppose makes the decisions that affect
Put the stoplight
your
there.
children's
The children's
classes
where school
and
goes, where
transportation
stop
people at
sign
the
goes,
state
local
level?
taxes, all those
Margie is
things.
100% right. State and local should be by far much more important and much more in tune with the voters than would be the federal government. I started the whole first segment talking about responsibility. Let me add to what Phyllis said.
lack thereof.
Voting is not just a privilege and a right; it is a
I
responsibility.
could not agree with Mike more.
Let's say
I
that's
agree
true.
with you,
Let's
Gordon.
say we
I
all
agree
want it to be.
completely.
Would you support a national holiday? Everyone gets a day off to vote. Because in Loudoun County, we've got the worst commutes on the East Coast, 2 kids and 2-income households. That's the statistics. If you got to get up at 6 a.m. to get to your job, and you don't get back home until 7:30, and you still got to get the kids to daycare and pick them up at the end of the day, what time do you have to vote?
You know what?
6 o'clock?
The truth is,
You have to leave before 6 a.m.
The truth
Be
is,
late to work that
if
day.
you can go in and make a case for absentee voting, if you can't vote that day, most actually employees will give you some provision to arrive or leave work 2 hours early. There is no reason.
That's
There is-
not. But that's not true in restaurants.
Evan,
it's not true in all
there
of these.
is no reason to not vote.
Oh, I agree with you.
Period.
But we need to make it easier.
Guys, let me go back.
Maybe a
to
24-hour
a
voting
local
cycle makes
issue
sense
that
now.
has impact that relates to this whole idea that our local officials matter. The Loudoun County Board of Supervisors reduced the tax rate significantly on significantly reduced property values. So I don't know what the projections are in terms of loss of revenue, but there's definitely going to be less revenue in the county to deal with education and whatever we need to contribute to our transportation infrastructure, which again includes Dulles Airport.
Not to mention cutting every social service the county offers. I mean,
So what do you think the fallout's going to be of that? So that goes to, well, these are the people, all of them elected in Loudoun as Republicans, to, I guess you could sort of generalize and say, kind of carry out sort of a Tea Party philosophy of just slash, and everything will be fine.
Let me say, this is how I've seen things work in Loudoun County and other places. People get a lower tax bill and they say, yay, my tax bill's lower. That is fantastic. I love these people in office. Great. And then those same people go to back to school night and they look at their child's third grade class and they see 35 kids stuffed in the third grade class and their child may be the child that needs a different type of help. And they say, what the heck's going on? Why is this classroom so big? Why is there no, this could be 2 classes. What's going on?
Sure.
And what they haven't done is make the connection between your tax rate and your classroom matters. And then they go drive down. They don't know. They don't know. And then they drive down the street and they say, there really needs to be a stoplight here. This stop sign's not working. I'm backed up for 5 minutes at the stop sign. Why is there no stop sign here? And they haven't made the connection between who they just put in office and why there is no stop sign here. And then they say, I have a new doggy. I don't have a dog park. I really need a dog park. Why don't I have a dog? And they haven't made the connection between who they just put in office and the dog park. So part of it is actually simple education about how important the local and state legislatures are to your everyday life. Yes, let's all come out and vote every 4 years for the president, but Barack Obama does not decide where the stoplight goes in the middle of my neighborhood.
But he wants to.
No, he doesn't.
Yes, he does.
No, he doesn't.
He wants you to do an environmental impact statement on that stop sign.
I would say, I bet you would agree, Mike, that one of the things I've learned living a very long time in Northern Virginia is if you don't like Loudoun politics right now, just wait for a little bit because it's going to swing. I mean, I have watched the Board of Supervisors and the political climate in Loudoun swing back and forth on a number of occasions. And my prediction is that with Virginia being such a battleground state for this year, for the presidential election year, we're going to see a lot more energy among the suburban jurisdictions in Loudoun and in Fairfax all over. It may change the dynamic and it may raise the consciousness of people who make a connection between public service and what I'm getting in my community. But I think it will have a lot more heat and light on these issues than we have in the past.
But in 2008, Loudoun votes the first in 44 years for a Democratic president. Right. And then the next year vote for a full slate of Republican state leadership.
Loudoun didn't vote for that. A small minority of people who live in Loudoun voted for that.
Well, no,
when more people vote in Loudoun,
well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That the voting populace just shrunk by about 40 to 50% in 1 year, and that's your perfect evidence for people not connecting or not feeling that they, as Phyllis gave us quite a few good examples, there's a connection. And really understanding what their philosophy is towards local government. And that goes back to what
Mike says. If 28% of people vote and they get the government that they get, then shame on the people that didn't vote because it's their responsibility to vote. And I don't give a pass to people who don't vote. I don't give a pass to them. If you don't like the government that you have, local, state, or federal, get up, get involved, get educated, get up, go out and vote. It's your responsibility, not just your right. And no one gets a pass from you on that.
Regardless of whether it's a responsibility, which it is, we who want more people to vote should all be united in making it easier for people to vote. Why don't we have mail-in? If you agree with me on 100% turnout, Oregon has some of the greatest turnout in the entire country because they have mail-in voting. They mail in their ballots and it gets like 80+% in every election. Would you support that?
No,
Why not?
Too much potential for fraud.
Too much potential for fraud.
I like the idea of traditionally reserving a part of your day, going down to your precinct where you're with your neighbors and your friends and people you know and casting your ballot. It's just part of American democracy to me. It's a great tradition. I don't want to see that ever go away.
I want to see lots of activism this year and lots of people at grassroots licking envelopes and standing at doors and putting up signs. And I think for the state and for the national elections, I think it's going to be an exciting year to be in Virginia.
Everyone,
because
no matter what side you're on, you ought to have a yard sign in your yard.
That's exactly right. We're going to have fun
This
with it.
is a presidential year, too, so I want to go back to that. I shouldn't say two. That's the big headline this year. And we have a couple minutes left and wanted everyone to kind of do their own commentary on where we are in the presidential race right now. I know the president's in Richmond today, and this is the official kickoff of his campaign. I'm going to start with Phyllis, and we'll go around the horn here.
What an interesting year this is going to be, I think, and I think it's going to be even more interesting for Virginia, which is said to be the new Florida. That no one has a path to the presidency if they don't win Virginia. And so I think that's really very exciting. I actually will sit here on Cinco de Mayo and predict that Barack Obama will win this election, but it won't be an easy path, actually. I think we have to really engage people, engage young people again. I think that as amazing as this president has been, the one thing he's not done well was tell the story of all that he's done, starting with the Lilly Ledbetter Act and going all the way through. I think that Virginia is going to see more both candidates on the ground and, unfortunately, because of the Citizens United ruling, more really vitriolic, ugly commercials on television, Super PAC commercials on TV also. So it's going to be a very busy and active year for anyone who's at all engaged this year in Virginia.
Let's go to Mike.
Absolutely an interesting year, fascinating. Me and my friends sit there and we play with electoral maps all the time.
We do.
People
like us do that.
I could draw it either way, to be honest. I'll disagree with Phyllis. I think the president can get reelected without Virginia. I don't think that Governor Romney can get elected without Virginia. However, I'm fairly confident that Governor Romney is going to carry Virginia, so that takes that out of play for us.
Yeah, so this is the new PPD poll, and the Washington Post poll has him 7 points down.
Poll is just...
All the polls have him down. It's not just the Washington Post. The only poll that had him up was the Washington Examiner poll. It was the only outlier poll that had Mitt Romney up.
We'll see where it is in September.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
It could go either way. I don't think it's going to be a landslide either way. I think it's going to be relatively close. I don't think anybody's going to get to 300 electoral votes. I think it'll be between the 272 and the 300 number. Yeah. But I will leave my colleagues with a quote from Pat Caddell, who, as everybody might remember, is Jimmy Carter's old pollster and still a active Democrat, and thinks his party has drifted too far to the left. And he is saying that in his estimation, it feels more like 1980 to him than anything else. So, as everybody remembers, that was the year in the last 4 to 5 days the bottom fell out of Jimmy Carter's re-election, and Ronald Reagan
but he also followed with. But he also followed
Let's
with.
Say Margie,
he thought it was 1984 Barack Obama.
We got to get Margie and Evan in here.
I think that Barack Obama has done an amazing job resurrecting this economy from the depths of which we have not seen since 1932. And I think it is going to be, as Phyllis said, a very long slog. I think Virginia will be a battleground, Mike, and I do believe that the question will come down to fairness and optimism, which I think the president and Tim Kaine helping him is going to project. I think that Mitt Romney's problem in the long run is going to be the lack of authenticity and the inability of voters to make a connection with him and understand who he is and what he stands for and what his leadership's been.
We got a couple seconds, Evan. Sorry.
Well, I believe strongly Barack Obama is going to carry the Commonwealth of Virginia because I think Virginians understand that government is not something that happens to us. Government is something that we all as citizens do. We are all the government. Barack Obama is the best of us. This is an American dream come true.
All right. On that note, we'll see you next month on The Road to.